Welcome to the Strong Women's Club, episode number 92.
This is the Strong Women's Club, where successful women share their behind-the-scenes stories of how they got to where they are today. Join us.
Hi, everybody. This is Edie Berg. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I have a couple of things to talk to you about before we get into the interview. The first is that today in Israel, it is Holocaust Memorial Day. I usually record the intro and the outro for the podcast close to the day of release. And the interview itself could have been recorded any time. And today's interview was recorded just last week. Then after I record, I send to the editors, and then they publish the interview after they clean it up and fix up the mistakes that I make. So they publish them on Wednesday nights or Thursday mornings. I'm not really sure exactly. They're in a different time zone to me. So even though this might be old news to you, no matter when I record, I'd like to mention here Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'll tell you how our country here in Israel remembers things, and it's really kind of different to, let's say, the Memorial Day in the United States, for example. We have 2 days a year that are like this, Holocaust Remembrance Day today and Israel Memorial Day, which is next week, and I'll talk about that then. But for Holocaust Remembrance Day, in the evening before, there are many, many ceremonies, and then people usually go home and watch TV. So all of the regular programming on the TV is off. You can't watch your regular programming if you wanted to. And what there is are documentaries and movies all around the Holocaust, and you have a wide range that you can choose from. On the radio, only sad music, beautiful but sad. All the restaurants are closed. You can't go out to eat. The businesses are open, but the restaurants are closed. And let's say if you go to the gym and you want to have a workout, there won't be any music. At 10 a.m., today in the morning, there is a siren. So it's a two-minute siren. It's pretty long, where everything stops. Everything. The freeways stop. People stop their cars or their trucks or whatever. They get out. They stand attention next to their cars for those whole 2 minutes, and they think to themselves, and they remember all of the people that were murdered during the Holocaust. Also, we light candles in our houses. It's a 24-hour remembrance candle, everyone in their own home. And the kids at school will have ceremonies that they prepare. Another thing that many people do is that the families and friends get together in the evening to hear stories about the people that they lost. And now, as the years go on, there are fewer and fewer live survivors, but some are still alive. People who survived, who were actually in the Holocaust themselves. And they tell their stories about exactly what happened to them during the Holocaust and during the war, where they were from, how they survived, why they survived, and who they lost. And in this way, we are able to keep the memories alive. We respect those that were killed, and we promise to ourselves and to our families and to our country that it will never happen again. So now, as we do around here, we're going to have a quick switch to the happy. The Strong Jewish Women's Summit has begun, and by the time this podcast is published in a couple of days, it will be in full swing, but it won't be over yet. So you can still go and sign up for free and listen to some of the interviews. Even for just one day, it's still worth it because there are 5 interviews released each day, and also you have access to those that were released the day before. And every day there are 5 interviews or 6. So there's plenty of content, even if it's just one day left. So go over and register for free. And even right now, just stop the podcast and jump over there and sign up and listen to whatever you want there, because that is going away. And the podcast is not. The podcast is always going to be here, but the summit is going to be ending soon. Except, of course, if you buy a premium pass. If you choose to buy a premium pass at any time, then you can listen to the interviews whenever you like. That's the whole point of the premium pass, plus all the bonuses and everything. Premium passes prices, though, do go up after the summit is over. So if you want to buy a ticket, now's the time. Go over there and do it, and then come back. And now that you're back here, let's talk about the podcast. Today's guest is Rachel Braun Scherl, and she is a co-founder of Spark Solutions for Growth, a consulting firm which advises businesses on strategic growth and partnerships and product developing and marketing. And she has an international client base. And she was very recently commended by the JWI as one of the 2016 Women to Watch, among other prestigious awards that she has won. So we talk a lot about business, and specifically around business that have to do with female sexual satisfaction in other female products and things to do with women. So if that's not interesting to you or those in the car with you, though I find it hard to believe that it won't be interesting, maybe interesting is not the right word to use, then maybe you wouldn't like to listen to it on the speakers. But if it does sound really compelling to you, then I fear you will be disappointed because this is a purely business discussion. And with all that said, I'd like to introduce to you Rachel Braun Scherl. Rachel Braun Scherl, thank you so much for coming on to the Strong Women's Club podcast. It's an honor to have you here, and I'm hoping the Skype is going to hold out and we'll be able to have an intelligent conversation.
Delighted to be here.
So let's just start. Let's get straight to the point, and you can tell me what orgasmic leadership is.
Okay, so I've spent a lot of my career building businesses and brands, mine and those of large companies. So I work with Fortune 500 companies, and I also work with a lot of startups. And about 10 years ago, I got involved and was running a female sexual health company, which had a product that improved arousal, desire, and satisfaction for women, which is a mouthful, but it was a topically applied patented blend of botanical oils and extracts that increased arousal, desire, and satisfaction. So I was deemed and named and trademarked a Vagipreneur, a person in the business of female health. And since then, I've focused much of my efforts on business building and strategic growth on women's businesses. So that very broadly is anything around female health, female sexual health, and wellness. So think pregnancy monitoring, reproductive health, fertility, infertility, egg freezing, arousal, anything in that sort of broad category. And one of the things that I learned in working on and running these businesses is there are some particular idiosyncrasies that make it a challenge to build businesses, at least in the US, in this space, which is a general discomfort around female sex, sexuality, and a whole bunch of other things. And so my objective is not necessarily making a political statement, but orgasmic leadership is really the idea behind this book I'm working on, where I've interviewed so far about 20 leaders who are building businesses in different aspects of female health and wellness, and the particular challenges they face, as well as the incredibly creative solutions many of them come up with to get the funding they need, to get the customers they need, to drive the growth of their business. So orgasmic leadership is all of that combined, the ability to create a business, to visualize a business, and to do the things you need to do to grow it so that it becomes a profitable and successful business.
So let's try and highlight one of these businesses so that we can get a more detailed picture of what you're exactly talking about. Do you have an interesting story? I'm sure you do.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the folks that I've interviewed and that I work with is in the fertility space. So picture, as you might imagine, there's tons of media around this, that the average female entrepreneur who goes into a VC is looking at a bunch of faces that generally don't look the way hers does, either because they're all men or they're from different backgrounds. What's interesting, just to compare an arousal business to a fertility business, is when I would go in to pitch to raise money for arousal, which we ultimately did after a lot of hard work, the reaction we would get is something like, well, this isn't relevant. This is a niche product. This can't possibly be me because my partner or my wife or my girlfriend or my partner couldn't possibly have an issue with this. That's one side. When you go in and you're talking about fertility, as challenging and as personal as that is, all you need is one investor in the room who's struggled with this in his life, in his family's life, his sister, his cousin, his aunt, his daughter, and all of a sudden you go from a niche business to a business that they can relate to. So one of the big challenges is walking into that room, asking for money, and the initial assumption, if it's for women, is that it's a niche business. And as far as I'm concerned, any business that affects 50% of the population is hardly a niche. The challenge is getting the story to the place where the people in the room can imagine that this is a business that has legs and momentum and the opportunity to grow and be successful.
Mm-hmm. So you started working, as you said, like 10 years ago, or maybe more than 10 years ago in this field. Have you seen any difference, any change in the VCs in their outlook towards businesses that are benefit, I mean, they benefit women directly, but they benefit men directly as well.
Yes, I think you bring up a good point. It's not always obvious how it benefits the men in the initial discussion. And I want to answer your question and talk about the changes. But just as a for instance, again, when we were raising money around arousal, we did clinical studies. We had a placebo-controlled double-blind study in 13 sexual health centers. And we had measures that improved her arousal, her desire, and her feelings of satisfaction. And the first question I got was, well, what does it do for his satisfaction? And, the real answer was, it's really designed for her. And what we believe anecdotally from the clinical study is that his satisfaction is a result of the experience being better for her. And in certain cases, unfortunately, you lose their interest at that point. So let me tell you what's different. There's a fair amount of funding, and there's this great map that I can send you, which shows how much has changed in financing and what they're calling FemTech, which is around any number of different areas. So fertility is one, different distribution models that make it easier to get the products you need at home, whether they're arousal toys or menstrual products or period-proof underwear, or even a device that you can insert when you're menstruating, which makes it more not necessarily comfortable, but makes it easier for the woman or the man. And again, a lot of these are for heterosexual and same-sex interaction. But for when a woman is menstruating, you can use this device and have sex. And I don't know how anybody else was taught growing up, but I remember very clearly being in 8th grade health, being told that you couldn't have sex when you were menstruating, which is just patently untrue. So there are lots of businesses that are making money. And again, different materials that can be used for condoms, businesses that are more sustainable. So aspects of it, they're making a whole lot of progress in getting attention. Social media seems to be responding. What isn't much better, from what I could see, is the ability to advertise on Facebook, for instance, which is incredibly fruitful for a lot of these businesses, many of which skew older. Your audience is there. You can target efficiently. You can get to your people, but that outlet is still not open. There's another business that the woman who's running it is really just a dynamo, a powerhouse, and her business, certainly has sex as part of it. She's had incredible trouble getting fundraising, and she's even had trouble getting credit card purchasers to take on her business so that people can engage in the transactions that grow her business and her site.
Really?
So it's a
that doesn't make any
sword.
sense at all. I mean, what about porn? I mean, porn sites get lots of credit card purchases. I don't understand that.
I have been trying for many years to understand the discrepancies, and in large part, one of the ways that I built my arousal business was based on that very fact, that there was a discrepancy in a lot of different things. You talked about porn versus, whatever is other, but discrepancies between large companies being able to advertise versus small companies. And in this space, most of them are startups, products for men versus products for women. Case in point, you can see a Viagra ad at 5 p.m. on CBS during the Super Bowl. When we got started, we couldn't get on Lifetime at 8:30 p.m. when I'm pretty sure there are no 12-year-old boys watching. So there are a lot of disparities. I do want to bring up one article that I read and an article that I subsequently wrote on it, which I think gives some insight. And again, I think this phenomenon is very strong in the U.S., and I know that the culture around female sexuality is different when you travel around the world. But a couple of years ago, there was a cover story in the New York Times Magazine section called "Unexcited, Is There a Pill for That?" And the article basically talked about a couple of products that were in development to improve arousal or desire for women. And they made a statement, which I'll never forget. And they said, this is one of the few categories where there is some concern that a product might work too well, lest there be, and now I'm doing the universal sign of quotation marks, sex-crazed binges of infidelity, end quote. So the concept that if it works well, there'll be panic in the streets with women, sexually charged, doing God knows what, to which my answer is, I have not seen, a total global shutdown and terror because men are running around with 4-hour erections.
Right.
I just use that example to say there is really skepticism, concern, lack of understanding when it comes to female sexuality. And I've seen that time and time again in many, many businesses in many, many settings. That being said, there are people who are stepping up. There are women who fund other women who are helping these businesses. There are people taking risks behind a leader who they think can make this business grow, behind a technology that they think is clinically valid. So there are people taking risks. I would say it's still much more the exception than the rule, although there is clearly some momentum.
I have to say, I'm deeply surprised by what you're saying to me, mainly because I would believe that VCs nowadays would be far more socially aware and far more business, interested in the business behind the startup and not what the label is. And, in the marketing, the branding and everything else that goes into building a business.
And I do think they believe they're making those decisions, and the companies that they're investing in, I do believe they think meets that criteria. But just to provide an example of how I sort of got around that to get my story heard, as I mentioned, we had meetings with 13 VCs in 2 days, which from the entrepreneur standpoint becomes somewhat of a blur. And we're in Silicon Valley. And as I mentioned, the first person asked about satisfaction, and my answer that it was more about her was not as compelling. The second person asked how this particular product that we were working with was different than Viagra. So I went into a fairly detailed explanation about how Viagra and like drugs work as vasodilators, and they increase the blood flow, and didn't get to the business discussion. So the third time, we now have 11 left, and I look at my business partner and I said, we have to try something different. I happen to be one of those people who never has any cash in my wallet. I could go a week with $1 and I put everything on credit cards because I'm compulsive and like to be able to track everything that I spend. But this particular day, there was some divine intervention and I had a $100 bill in my wallet. So I said to my business partner, let me try something. We're going into the third one. We'll still have 8 more. If this is a disaster, I won't try it again, but humor me. So we walk into the third meeting and I have a $100 bill in my hand, which I'm already excited about because it's so rare. And I slapped the $100 bill on the table and I said, here's a $100 bill. This $100 bill is yours. If you ask a question about the category that we can't answer, if you say a double entendre or make a sexual innuendo that we haven't heard before, or you say anything around this category that makes us blush, this $100 is yours. And then I pause and I say, she likes it more. She wants to have it more. Let's talk about the business model. And basically there's a period of quiet, which probably was 20 seconds, but feels like an hour, right, where I sort of shift the energy in the room to say, this is about a business. This isn't meant to be titillating. This isn't for entertainment value. There's a real business and real metrics and real people behind this. So if we could get away from the part that is embarrassing everybody and actually talk about the fundamentals of the business and the target that we're going after, perhaps we will get to have a real business discussion. And that turned out to be a very effective way because I think it signaled we're not embarrassed. We are business people. We're here to talk about something real. Give us your best shot. We can take it. Mm-hmm. And we were able to change the conversation to be around the product and what it did and who the target market was and what our plans were for growth and what were the uses of the funds. If we were to raise money from them, how would we use them? And a lot of the real fundamental issues of the category we were in and the business we were trying to build.
Right. So you were ultimately successful. Were you successful in those 2 days from there?
I always wish the end of that story was they gave us one of those big 14-foot cardboard checks that said, here's $7 million. Congratulations. We ultimately were successful as a result of those meetings and some others and raised, tens of millions of dollars in venture capital in 2008 when the bottom is falling out of the financial market. So, we were doing this in a time when Shearson Lehman's going bankrupt, a number of other large companies are going bankrupt, and you're talking about a category as two women. My business partner is a woman as well, in Silicon Valley, talking about a business around vaginas.
Yeah. So let's talk about women as business leaders and founders, and I'm particularly interested in. I think many women have great ideas or ideas that can make money, and they take it to a certain level, and then they kind of. It's not that they. I think they don't know how to dream or to see the ideal situation, right? To dream big or to see the end spot, the end point. So what do you think that's true for women, or what do you think about that?
I think there are a lot of sweeping generalizations that we can make. Some are true, some aren't true. So, they say that women tend to invest in and build product companies. They say women tend to be more focused on being perfect, which doesn't, enable messy growth, which a lot of businesses, especially new businesses, experience. They're more focused on profitability. Certainly that last one rings true for me and makes a whole lot of sense. So I think, yes, that is true in certain cases. I think it's exacerbated by the fact that, women get 7% of the venture capital dollars. About 11% of the investors are women, and those things turn out to matter. So I don't know that she's necessarily going in saying, I want to build a small business. Maybe some women are doing that and are risk averse, as are some men. But in my experience, it's more around, I need to get the attention of the people with the money, and it's a lot harder.
Okay. I see what you're saying. So in your research now and in your experience in this field, what kind of women, is there a kind of a generalization of the kind of women who are leaders of startups like this?
In female health specifically?
Well, not even, just in general, women who are looking, to start a startup or, to go the VC route.
Yeah, I think you have to have a lot of confidence. You have to have a track record. You have to have some experience to fall back on. You have to have a very thick skin. I looked at the fundraising almost like aerobic activity. So, my endorphins would get going trying to figure out how I was going to sell this idea and get people to be interested in it. But you have to be willing to be knocked down a whole lot of times and really not personalize anything. In addition to having some skills that are investable behind, a track record of having done some things fairly successfully, because people like to bet on a winner. Although there is a lot of talk in Silicon Valley that many firms won't invest in someone who hasn't had a failure, because it does teach you a whole lot of things. I think you have to have a fundamental belief in what it is you're doing. Oftentimes when I'm interviewing women for orgasmic leadership, especially, we talk about passion. And what I've come to realize is that's not passion because it's a solution for women. For me, what I understand and what it becomes for me is you have to be passionate about your business because it's really hard. And, there's a fundamental truth that I see for most businesses, which is everything is harder, takes longer, requires more money, and goes in much more of a jagged line than a straight line than anybody anticipates. So I think you have to be willing to live with risk. I think you have to know what your particular risk profile is. And when I'm talking to potential entrepreneurs, I say you have to know what you can live without. If you're starting a business and you're trying to feed your family of 7 or whatever the case may be, and you need this to work, there's a sense of urgency that requires you to really focus on it. On the other hand, if the stress of that is too much, then maybe it's not meant for this person at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you have to kind of enjoy the route, enjoy the journey, and be kind of a naively positive.
I agree.
Right. That you'll know that it's going to work out. You have to keep working. Of course, you have to put the work in. You have to be persistent, as I said before, and you have to follow through all the time and be creative and all those things. But you have to enjoy that is the life. The exit is not the life. The life is the journey. Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think sometimes we set too high a bar and say, when people say, if you're passionate about it or it's something you love, it's not work. I'm very passionate about what I do, and still certain days it absolutely feels like work. So I try to balance pragmatism with realism. So it is hard work. I am prepared. When I quote those statistics about what it's like for women versus men, that's not to say that gives you an excuse. It's to say, be prepared when you go into that situation, the context in which you're trying to raise money and the context in which you're trying to build a business.
Yeah. I saw in one of the videos that I was of you today when I was doing researching your work that you had a workshop with role playing and I don't know exactly who the audience was, who the participants were, but it seemed to me that there were women who had small businesses. And I just wanted to ask you about the value of doing those kinds of exercises.
So I've done this exercise both in large corporations with people who are moving up the corporate ladder, as well as with women in startups, and then every size in between. And one of the primary ideas behind some of the work that I do in these workshops is that you have to know how you lead, how you're going to communicate, how you're going to effectively sell. You are, in many cases, the business, the face, the brains, the mind, the leader of the business. And what I say is you would never go onto a ball field, or you would never go into, I hope, people would not go into important situations without practicing. So the very simple act of practicing your pitch, of looking in the mirror, of taping yourself, of sitting down with a friend, of finding a low-risk environment where you can practice and see how the words feel and the messaging feels coming out of your mouth. It is such a simple thing to do and something that so few people do. Both my kids are competitive athletes. I cannot picture a scenario where they would enter a tournament or get on the court without practicing. Why would you put yourself at a disadvantage and not prepare yourself the same way when you're walking into a business situation? I don't want the first time I pitch an idea, or the first time I present my message, or the first time I try to motivate people to be the first time I'm saying it in front of somebody else. There are so many opportunities to practice, and there are plenty. I often talk about do it in a low risk situation. Don't go into the meeting where you're trying to pitch your promotion prospects to your boss and have that be the first time that you've said it. You have a friend at work, mother, sister, partner, whatever it is, sit down with someone from whom you can take honest and constructive feedback to say, you know what, I wasn't convinced. I didn't believe you when you were saying that, or I didn't think your details were specific enough, or I got the sense that, you were going off message. You don't have to say this to a business person for someone to help you evaluate how effective your communication is. And my experience in talking to many, many women, as I said, from, college to business school to startup to large companies, is that once they figure out how to do this, how to find their leadership voice, they have many more opportunities. Hamilton is sweeping the US and everybody's trying to see the show, which is amazing, by the way. And there's one
that's so funny. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop. I'm going to interrupt you because I did like this Instagram, the stories this morning, and I said if you're stressed, because I'm working so hard on the summit at the moment, the best thing to do if you're stressed is to go out and to sit with a place where nobody can hear you and sing Hamilton to music that nobody else can hear at the top of your lungs, and that will get you out of it. And that works. That definitely works.
So, absolutely. And there's a song that, if you're familiar with the music, this will be familiar to you. When Aaron Burr, who shoots Alexander Hamilton, and unfortunately, as he said, that's the thing he's most famous for. There are a bunch of negotiations going on, and he's not in the room where it happens. And he sings this line, "I want to be in the room where it happens." No one really knows how the sausage gets made in the room where it happens. And my experience is when you figure out how to sell, you figure out how to present, you figure out how to build the confidence behind your story, you get into the room much more often. So I think of this skill as not only increasing your chances of success, but increasing your chances at bat.
Right. Just, yes. Okay, good. Last thing I'm going to ask you before we finish off is about having a co-founder or a partner, I should say, rather than having employees. And I know that you have a very successful partnership with your partner or your co-founder, but how do you make that choice between, as I said, like hiring people or having a partner, which is always often a huge risk and can be a terrible failure?
So there are a couple answers to that, because I've had the same partner and we've had a partnership with no employees, and we've run business together with employees. And I would say that for us, and for me specifically, the fundamental thing is to share similar values. And I don't mean you have to agree on everything. I don't mean you have to be the best of friends. I mean that fundamental principles, like what is right and wrong, what you will and won't do, what the business will and won't do, work ethic, trust, that those are fundamental. And so we have that in our partnership when it's the two of us working with other companies. When we build businesses together and build employees, what we do is we state very clearly, here are the values of the company. Here's the culture of the company. Essentially it's us. That doesn't have to work for you, but we want you to walk in knowing what it's going to be like. We're very direct. We gather information. We're not always driving to consensus. We will make decisions with limited data, but the best data that we have, and we will move the business forward. I have three fundamental principles that we like to use when we hire people for startups. One is, I want you doing something for me that you've done for somebody else, so that I could take advantage of the fact that someone has trained you to do this. We want self-starters. We're not going to be hovering over you. There's a ton to get done. And, can't be like nursery school where we have to constantly remind people what they need to do. And for us, the third one might sound funny, but it is critically important. We need people who are low emotional maintenance, because there's just too much to do to bring all that stuff. Now, there are plenty of people who say you bring your whole self to the workplace. And I believe all that. And I believe you have to be in an environment where you feel like if something goes wrong, you have someone to speak to. That, in my mind, is different than making your personal problems the problems of the workplace.
Right. Okay, I understand all that. That makes perfect sense, of course. But my question, what I mean is when somebody's just starting off and they don't have a partner yet.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And then they need to make a decision. Do I look for a partner that I'm going to give part of my business, or not even give? It's going to be theirs as well. And then I might have to have a divorce, right? Or not, right? Or do I take somebody and just pay them to do the same work?
Okay. I got it. So the question really was looking for a co-founder or someone who is actually an employee to support your business. There are plenty of examples of it working both ways. For me, I found the backup of having a partner made a lot of things easier. I also believe that you have to spend the time. If you haven't done the research to find the right person, and you could do tons of research and still be wrong, there's no question about it. But if you don't find a person who checks the boxes you need them to check, then start with an employee. And ultimately, over the course of building your business, that person might grow into a partner, or you might find somebody else. But do not create a partnership if you have that horrible feeling in your stomach. And I say this especially for people of a little bit more experience. Often folks use the expression, trust your gut. And I think your gut is much more reliable when you have some experience to fall back on. But when something feels right and when something doesn't. And I consider myself a person who's been in a business a very long time. And I've hit the jackpot a few times with partners. And I've made choices because I felt boxed into a corner where I partnered, which is obviously different than partnership, got into a business relationship with people that I knew deep down were not the right kind of person. And every time I've done that, and every time I've defied that feeling in the pit of my stomach, I paid a price.
Right. So I think that's good advice, that you can start, if you don't know for 100%, as much as you can know about taking on a co-founder, then take on a good employee, an expensive employee, and ultimately that will cost you less until you find exactly the right person.
And you just made a point that I think is so important. Money is so scarce, and obviously money and time are the things that an entrepreneur worries about. But I have found it is much better to pay up for the talent you need. And that's been my experience. And obviously everybody has a different point of view, but I've had great experiences where I hire someone who I couldn't afford full time, but who has the experience that I need, and I hire them part time, and they get an unbelievable amount done because they have so much experience to fall back on.
Right. Perfect. So I know that you do a lot of speaking also. So where can people find you and learn about when your book comes out, and where's the best place to go?
I've a website, Spark Solutions for Growth, which is where I house all the stuff that I write, all the clients I work for, working on the book around female sexual health. And it's sort of, my world, my entire world of business at Spark Solutions for Growth. And I try to be really, really responsive to any kind of outreach. And I try to, one of the things that I suggest to people that I try to hold myself to is when you're interested in reaching out to someone, ask for something specific. So I never say, do you want to brainstorm? I'll say, I noticed you're good at XYZ. Can we spend 10 minutes on the phone talking about that? And people are so busy. The people I reach out to are so busy. And I'm sure the people who reach out to me find me busy. I find that if you've done some background work and know a little bit about what you want to talk to the person about, it makes the contact much more productive for both of you.
Right. Great. So thank you so much for coming onto the program. I got a little bit of free mentoring there. So so that was good. And I'm sure everybody will find that really a valuable conversation. Rachel Braun Scherl, thank you so much for coming to the Strong Women's Club podcast. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm wishing you a great day.
Thank you again to Rachel Braun Scherl for coming on to the Strong Women's Club podcast. To me, the world of startups is very exciting, and it's important for women to understand and to know that this is another area that we are severely underrepresented. Fewer women are founders of startup companies on the side of the startups, and fewer women are on the side of the VCs and angel investors as well. Rachel is bridging these two worlds. She's helping businesses who in turn want to solve problems that are special to women. So thank you to Rachel. That's it for today. Next week, a summation, an overview of the summit, how it went, what went on, comments, things to do for next time that might be better or to continue that went well. And then we'll also be talking about what's planned for the next few months. The URL for the summit is www.thestrongjewishwomensummit.com. Go on over there, sign up if you haven't yet. If you already have, then please let me know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying. In our Facebook groups, we have two. We have one big one for everybody and one smaller VIP group for the Premium Pass holders. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you coming over here every week. Have a strong week, everybody. Litrot.